Mommy, I forgot my crystal bracelet.
It's okay, sweetheart. It'll still be there when we get back. Everyone loves the picture I posted of you.
I don't think there are many people left on the planet who have access to electricity and computers who would ever go back to not having the internet.
I do think they think differently, and the real question, I think, is how much of that is normal human plasticity, right? We all are really good at responding to opportunities, and this young generation has different opportunities than my generation had. And how much of it is actually that their brains are being wired differently because of exposure to the media environment they're being exposed to. The first category is it's relatively easy to see examples of that. In the States right now, because we're very good at moral panics, people my age, mid-40s and up, are wringing their hands right over what teens are doing on Facebook. As if we would not have done those things had Facebook existed when we were young. And so we want to project this idea, I wasn't putting drunk pictures of myself up on Facebook. It's like, no one gave us the chance. But I remember us. I think we would have done that in a heartbeat.
I think one of the things that has happened to the first generation of kids to grow up always being online, which by the way are my kids. They have never experienced dial-up or anything like that. They've always had always on.
I'm a little nervous about drawing a sharp distinction between what we call, Generation Web or digital natives and older people, adults, because what I think that's that lets adults off the hook, and they can say, as they always say, this younger generation, they're, going to hell or whatever, and really the effects of the internet, I think, are the same on adults as on younger kids and younger adults. And so I would hate to have the focus on Generation Web, make it seem as though older people aren't affected by the internet, because I think they are. And I think what we see in young people, the distractedness, the inability to, read more than 2 pages at a time, is probably coming to characterize older people in every generation as well.
They also feel as if they are always connected to everyone else. There is a feeling of being connected that I did not have in my generation.
Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
Obviously, the brain is the human brain is malleable throughout the course of anybody's life, but it's particularly malleable, of course, when you're young. So if a person is brought up looking at screens and using the web and being bombarded by information, then the question is, will the brain circuitry necessary to do things like deep reading, deep thinking, will those circuits ever even come into being? Will they be wired for that kind of thinking, or will they be wired completely for internet type of thinking?
And so I think we live in a kind of paradoxical time, and we're giving our teenagers a paradox, or the whole generation, not just our teenagers, but our babies growing up, a very paradoxical message. The world is more and more and more and more complex. On the other hand, we're only going to ask you a question that you can answer in 2 seconds. So we leave ourselves less and less time for reflection because our communications media push us to quick responses. And quite frankly, the questions before our planet right now are not questions that should be answered or thought about in the time space of texting.
Yeah. Throughout my life, books have played an important role in them, and I've always found it easy to immerse myself in a book and get engaged in an argument or a narrative. But a few years ago, as my use of the web kind of picked up, I found it much harder to sit down and engage with a book. After a page or two, my mind would start wandering. I'd kind of lose the focus, have to go back a page to reconnect with the argument. But what I noticed is that the sensation I had when I tried to read or really concentrate on anything was that my brain, my mind, wanted to behave the way it behaves when I'm at my computer or online. It wanted to check email. It wanted to click on links and jump from page to page. So it really, I began to make the connection that, in a really an unmistakable way, my use of the net was changing the way I think.
You can actually bring most of what's been so important and in fact epical about the internet down to the simple hyperlink. And you can think of a hyperlink as being a new type of punctuation. The old types of punctuation tells you where to stop. Hyperlink encourages you, beckons you to continue. It makes it so easy to continue to the next thing. You have to do the most minimal human action, which is go like this with your finger. I mean, it really couldn't get any less than that. And you are off into the next page, the next world, the next person. We haven't had anything like that before.
And if you look at the way the internet bombards us with stimuli, not only hyperlinks and different pages of information, but alerts, from Facebook updates to Twitter alerts to, incoming email and even our phones going off all the time. It creates, in a sense, an environment of information that plays to our desire to, or our need to be distracted. And so it becomes very difficult to keep a focus on anything when, 5 different things are happening at once and keep us pretty much permanently distracted when we're online.
Life is people are hungry for community. They're hungry for meaning in a society that is oriented around the production and consumption of consumer goods. Buy more stuff. I mean, it doesn't make people happy. I know this sounds like a gross oversimplification, and in some ways it is. But when there's an alternative to be able to reach out and to find kindred spirits who have common interests or share a common perspective on life and to feel fulfilled by that, people will do that even if it is a somewhat low resolution version of reality. And I would call a virtual world like a very low res version of real reality. People are hungry for meaning, hungry for contact.
Audio Jungle.
Look at the devolution of the way we represent ourselves online has devolved from the quirky, personalized HTML web page, homepage of the 90s, to the somewhat modular but still strange presence of a MySpace page, to the completely formatted and market-friendly presence of a Facebook page. What we've done is moved from personal, human, open-ended self-expression to completely market and computer-friendly, regimented and conformist expression. And that's because we've turned the net from a venue for self-expression to a way to render ourselves up onto the market.
Yeah, we're seeing patterns, and a lot of it has to do with their particular social positions, right?
So the popular kids are using the technologies to try to maintain and reinforce popularity in very particular ways. And that's where we see social status becoming really critical. So it's no longer the Nikes that are the particular status markers, it's the way of actually maintaining certain kinds of friendships and getting certain kinds of, responses from certain celebrities. All of that play goes on.
As a result, the internet does not foster humanity. The internet is about human beings conforming to the needs of technology as understood by the market, rather than human beings getting technology to extend and express what it means to be a human being. And that's why the net has moved from being part of the human potential movement to part of the really anti-human movement.
Like all technology, the internet is not a cure for human nature, it's an amplification of human nature, both the good and the bad of it.
Audio Jungle.
Seeing it. The much more momentous question for society, I think, is this. We've long known from sociological work on the way we live our lives that there's an inverse correlation between the number of friends we have and the depth of that friendship. So somebody who lives in a city can have hundreds of people they call friends. Somebody who lives in a small town can have dozens of people they call friends. But for both of those people, there's fewer than half a dozen people you'd give a kidney to.
They'll text, but they won't talk. One of the things that has been so, for somebody like me who does interviews and who believes in what you learn from the face, from, the philosophers tell us that we become human when we're confronted with another face through the voice, through the inflection of the voice. These kids don't want to see a face, they don't want to see a voice. They want to text. So that in a way we're no longer nourished but consumed in some way by what we've created. And I think that's very, it's not all good. It's not all good.
So you have strong ties, which are this tight core, and you've got weak ties, which can be small or large depending on where you are. Well, the web is like everybody lives in London, right? The web is like everybody has access to this enormous pool of people, inexhaustibly large and diverse pool of people. And as a result, on Facebook, on Twitter, on MySpace, on Bebo, et cetera, people have the experience of having thousands of friends, right? Well, no one really has thousands of friends. It's either the word thousands or the word friends has to be struck out for that sentence to make any sense. So it's evident to everybody that the web has been this incredible amplifier of weak ties, right? We have many, many more connections. People we knew, from high school or from college that we haven't seen in years, but somehow we're linked to in this way. What we don't know is what that's doing to strong ties. And there has been early research to suggest, in a way kind of alarmingly, that there really is a trade-off. That you can't just amplify the number of weak ties without decreasing either the number or the depth of strong ties you have. And if that's true, that's a big change, because it's nice to have people where you can say, oh, hey, I'm coming out to San Jose, you want to get together for coffee, whatever. But it's really nice to have somebody who'd loan you a kidney if you needed one.
Right. And so when I look at whether social technologies and the social web is a good thing or a bad thing, if it's horrible for society or wonderful for society, I think the reality is that it's here. It's not going away. And so it's up to people who use it to decide whether it is going to represent the best of human nature or the worst of human nature. And realistically, it's probably going to be a little bit of both.
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty amazing to see how the next generation, I guess, evolves, if you want to call it that.